All right, my English teacher friends. So I come to you with a Play-Doh discussion. So a lot of teachers have asked me why I don't use Socratic Seminars, Harkness Discussions, and Fishbowls. And ultimately, I say this. There's lots missing from them. There's lots lacking. So in my 21-year experience in the classroom, there are things that I like about all three of those discussion modalities. And what I've done with the Play-Doh discussion is take what I like and what works really well from those three modalities, and I've gamified it. I've made some edutainment exercises that kind of catapult discussion to the next level. So for this particular Play-Doh discussion video, I'm going to highlight my Connect 4 edition for the purposes of performing rhetorical analysis. And the three texts that we're going to look at are these. So I don't know if you saw the latest TikTok trend, but there's this little kid, Jeremy, he's 7 years old. The day after Christmas, wrote a letter to Santa Claus. He's very angry that he did not get all of the presents that he asked for. Rhetorically, even though it's from a 7-year-old, it's rife with good things to analyze. So we're going to focus on that letter. There's another one called Everybody Should Wear Sunscreen. It's a commencement speech that was turned into a song by Luhrmann, which is fantastic. And then Bill Clinton's I Have Sinned speech. So all three of those, either letters or speeches, are going to be featured in this edition of the Play-Doh discussion. Let me jump into a little bit more detail why I created this Play-Doh discussion. So of these three, Socratic Seminar, Harkness Discussion, Fishbowl, here's what I have found when I have run these in my classroom. Typically, depending on the class, I got about 4, 5, 6 kids that monopolize the conversation. While the other kids don't participate, they just kind of blend in with the wallpaper and occupy space and time and breathe the oxygen, but they don't do anything. They're just there, and I don't know what they're taking away. I don't know if there's any learning going on. I don't know if there's any processing. There's really no way to assess what is being garnered or lost from any of these discussion modalities. So in order to increase participation and in order to entertain more voices, I've created that Play-Doh discussion to remedy that. I also find that Socratic Seminars, Harkness Discussions, and Fishbowls often, unless I really facilitate them with great fidelity, they tend not to be very text-based. I want my students' nose in the text. I want them citing the text when they respond. And with the three above mentioned discussion modalities, there's a lot of talk around the text and not enough like in-depth, get your nose in there kind of discussion. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of with these three discussion modalities is that typically the way I've seen them done, the teacher is the one asking all the questions. I really think to improve reading skills and especially multiple choice test taking skills, we have to take a line from reading literature like a professor and have the students being the ones making the observations and asking the questions. So in this particular Play-Doh discussion, the questions are coming from my students. I'm going to highlight the questions that they posed of the text, not the questions that Mr. Kuhn posed of the text. So that's pretty interesting. So the other thing, too, that the Play-Doh discussion features are the elements of competition and collaboration. I have found that these two traits really change the dynamic of a discussion. And even though the students are just competing over a simple game of Connect 4, it adds a certain fire to discussions that typically are not there. And it also ends up being a great team building experience where they collaborate together and really assist and help each other to come up with really good, thoughtful, thought-provoking answers. But the kicker, as I said, is that I want to teach students to question the text. And oftentimes I'm asked, how do your kids score so high on the multiple choice? So like, what do you do? And it ultimately comes down to this. I think good multiple choice test takers can do a couple of things well. And one is they can make the keen observations that we want them to do. So going back to a text like, seminal text like reading literature like a professor, it all comes down to their observation, right? And if I'm the one asking all the questions during these discussions, it kind of precludes them, prevents them, deters them from, asking the pithy, juicy questions that need to be asked in order to ascertain meaning from a text. So I want them doing that, to question the text and, to be the meaning makers and not me have sole authority over that. So here's what I do, a little exercise that I do in my room. For homework each week, I send my students home with 3 rhetorical texts. They could be letters, the commencement speeches, presidential speeches, it doesn't matter. But I send them home with 3 texts. And between the days of Monday through Friday, they have to complete a reader response journal. And the only thing that they do in those journals is write down all the thought-provoking questions they could possibly scheme up with that particular text. And I often tell them, shoot for 4 questions per text, like 4, 5, 6 questions per text. Think in terms of like, what would the College Board be asking you on a multiple choice test if this text were to appear on the exam? So that's where I'm going. So what you're going to see in this particular Plato discussion are the questions that my students asked of the Santa Claus letter. Now, in order to get my students to ask these types of questions, it took a lot of Bob Rossing. And what I mean by that is I had to get to the proverbial easel and canvas and paint questions with my students. I had to really explicitly show them how to ask these good, juicy, pithy questions over and over again. So for full disclosure, I got these kids the day after Labor Day in September. At the time of recording this film, it's early January, so they've had a lot of training. So during September, October, November, I predominantly was the one asking the questions. Training wheels are off, scaffolds down, and they are exclusively asking the questions right now. So let's talk about the actual game format for this. So I quite literally have a Connect 4 in the center of the room, and I split the class into 2 teams, a red team and a yellow team. In order to have full participation, I have speaking quotas. So if a kid commits to an answer, they cannot answer again or help until everybody on that team has participated at least once. So that's the cycle. Once everyone participates once or twice, then you reset. So everyone needs to speak. And it's really cool. There's a little bit of peer pressure on that where, students will be like, okay, come on, Katrina, you're the only one that hasn't said anything. Say something. And it's really nice to see a team, bolster the, these students to speak. So on Canvas slides, I write down or I cut and paste the questions that the students create for their reader response journal. And the first hand that goes up, that team gets a crack at the question. The student who generated the questions for that particular passage is the one in charge. Me, the teacher, you, the teacher, are the tiebreaker because oftentimes kids will quibble and then the student in charge is like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. So I usually am the one assessing the way the conversation goes. And I award the tiebreakers. And that's pretty much it. So, the Connect 4 keeps score. Basic rules of Connect 4. You go until the game is done or until you've exhausted all the questions. So let's take a look at this letter that Jeremy wrote to Santa. So it's right here. And again, you can get these online if you want to. So this was all the TikTok rave the day after Christmas this year. So I'll read it to you. It says, Dear Santa, I'm writing this on the day after Xmas, and I am very sad. I only received one of the 2 presents I asked for. Since you ate my cookies, I will assume that my missing gift was a mistake. I will give you 1 week to fix this. Jeremy. All right, great piece. So, kids are like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I love this because it's kind of tricky. It's a statement of the obvious in terms of analyzing this, and it's just a little 7-year-old kid. So it's like, how do we take this rhetorically seriously? But there's so much to do with this. There's so much good rhetoric happening in here. So this is the first question that my student Samantha asked. So these are all of Samantha's questions. Note the various misspellings. Why is this syntactically significant, especially with regards to the establishment of the author's ethos? Go back. Well, that's huge. The kid's 7, right? In terms of establishing his ethos and this authority. He's got like this kind of despotic demand to Santa, you will give me my presents in a week's time, right? So all those misspellings are really kind of cool in terms of the establishing the ethos. It's a fantastic question. So this is Samantha's second question. I spy with my little eye that the pronoun I is never capitalized. How does this observation create meaning in the text as a whole? Let's go back. You see that? That's the kinds of observations I want my students to make. You know, when they write essays or answer multiple choice questions, you got to factor that stuff in, right? It's there. Might not have been Jeremy's intent, but it's there, so you got to analyze it. And that's the other thing I do with my kids. So I do a lot of new criticism and deconstruction with them, even though we're doing rhetorical analysis. My students go from Lang to Lit with me. So very early, like their sophomore year, we get into all the various critical theories, and they're well versed in new criticism and deconstruction. After having their 10th grade courses, they come to me junior year for AP Lang. Their eyes are well tuned to do new critical and deconstructive reads, which is pretty cool. So Jeremy's logos is quite clear. In your own words, reconstruct the basic premise of his argument. And go back. And he's like, I asked for 2 presents. You ate my cookies. You took something from me. You owe me, right? That's the syllogism of this. And on the multiple choice portion of the Lang exam, there are a lot of syllogistic questions, and my students are very well aware of that at this stage of the game. So they know that there would get syllogistic questions if we were to put this into a multiple choice test taking scenario. So that's fantastic. Students had a good time with that. Jeremy creates each sentence exclusively exercising independent clauses. How does this observation intersect with the establishment of his ethos, pathos, and tone? Again, great observation. So my students are learning how to do deep conceptual syntactical reads, and the fact that every sentence is a short, simple declarative sentence or an independent clause makes meaning in the piece, right? There's an authorial intention there, right? Above and beyond the fact that he's just 7 years old, there's meaning making there, and these questions are getting to the heart of that, which is very nice. 4 out of 5 sentences begin with the I pronoun. Great observation. So what? And they're borrowing my language. I say that all the time to them in class. Great observation. So what? So, students will be reading a piece and they'll be like, yeah, the 4th paragraph is one big, long, run-on sentence. Great observation. So what? How does it construct meaning? What's the authorial intent? All right. So get to those types of questions. So they borrow a lot of what they've learned from me in these questions. Characterize the last sentence. How does Jeremy's phrasing create meaning in the work as a whole? And again, fantastic set of questions. I mean, these are beautiful. So we did this, for the other 2 passages as well. The everybody should wear sunscreen and Bill Clinton's I have sinned. So if you got questions or want to try your hand at a Play-Doh discussion and you would like slides for all 3 passages, so you can have the Santa, the sunscreen, and Bill Clinton, feel free to email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. And you can try your hand at a Play-Doh discussion. I love this modality. I know I'm partial to it because it's my brainchild, but I just find that I can advance my students in terms of their reading, their writing, their speaking, and their thinking far better than the other 3 discussion modalities. So I'm pretty sold on this. And then also note that this is part and parcel of what we're doing over at the National Writing Project. So I'm a lead teacher over there. All of my professional development is now being housed by the National Writing Project. So if you would like to learn more of these tricks and some of my other gimmicks, especially in terms of my templates and my Nuance Academy, my Word Study Academy, and how I run things in my various classes, then come take a peek at my webpage, teachinghowtowrite.com, and maybe we can do some PD together. So that's it for now. I hope you're all well. Happy teaching, happy writing.